The Education Department has awarded 2 government contracts to 2 debt collection agencies who will now go after students who have defaulted on their student loan debt. Now, part of the problem with this story is not only is student loan debt insane and should be dealt with in a different way, but apparently one of these companies has ties to Betsy DeVos because she had invested in them. Now, Betsy DeVos is the head of the Education Department. She is our Education Secretary. So there is a conflict of interest here. But let me give you more details. You can decide for yourself. The decision to award contracts to Windham Professionals and Performant Financial Corp, a company DeVos invested in before becoming secretary, arrives a month after a federal judge ordered the department to complete its selection of a loan collector. Windham and Performant beat out nearly 40 other bidders for contracts valued up to $400 million, but their win may be short-lived if the losing companies fight the decision. And they do plan to fight the decision. Now, as I mentioned, there were 40 other bidders, and it was interesting to see that only 2 of them won the government contract. In the past, there were as many as 17 debt collection agencies that were awarded these contracts. And the fact that now that there are only 2 is questionable. The fact that one of them was a company that had ties to DeVos is super questionable. And then when you look at the ratings for these companies, it also raises an eyebrow. So Performant, which is the company that DeVos had ties to, of course gets rated like any other company, and they were rated as marginal in performance, marginal. Okay, later they were rated as satisfactory, but that is not impressive. And when you consider the competition for this contract, you wonder, why would the Education Department give the contract to Performant rather than some of the better performing agencies out there?
Well, you wonder, but you know the answer.
Oh yeah, we all know the answer. Okay.
Yeah, and unless marginal is the top rating, Anna, is marginal the top rating?
Yeah, what's the threshold?
I would guess it's not.
No, exceptional is the top rating, and they didn't get an.
The fact that they're grading companies on who can go and obtain money from students who are drowning in debt is already obscene as it is. But the fact is that Betsy DeVos has ties to one of them. It's like she wants to be the most hated person, especially to students all across the country, from an age of going into the public schooling system that she wants to just basically dissolve and put all of her resources towards private school funding. But now she wants to make sure that she goes and inherently makes your life miserable if you cannot afford to pay, which according to recent data, a class of 2015 graduated with an average of $35,000 in student loan debt. It's absolutely absurd. Rather than looking at solutions, we're now talking about ways that we can go and collect this money, because that's what's important.
And so, okay, so let's talk about the debt collection process, because while the corruption, in my opinion, is pretty clear here, and the conflict of interest is clear here, the bigger concern for me is how these debt collection agencies can go about collecting the debt without the proper oversight. Because remember, debt collection agencies don't usually have a great track record in following the law and avoiding abusive behavior. So that's what I'm concerned about. Going after these students with forms of intimidation, abusing their power, violating the law. You need to ensure that there are proper measures taken and proper oversight to prevent abusive behavior. And if the head of the Education Department has ties to your company, what are they gonna do to convince us that the proper safeguards will be taken into account when it comes to the way that they handle this debt? I mean, that's what worries me the most, right? Betsy DeVos, I mean, she is not gonna be the cop who's gonna protect the students who are dealing with these debt collectors, especially if she's in the past invested in these companies. Now, to be clear, she had to divest in order to become Education Secretary, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that company doesn't have sway over her.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that that it cuts her ties to the involvement in that company either. Like Donald Trump passes over the business investments to his sons. If you're foolish enough to believe that Donald Trump therefore completely cuts ties with everything, you know, I agree with that statement as well. We need to worry about the ways in which they go about collecting this debt. But what I worry about is the students themselves. Like, they already are so in debt to the point where they're scrutinized, especially the millennials, right? Which everyone will be like, oh, well, you're just entitled, you're too busy buying avocado toast and all that shit. But regardless, it's the point in which there's no solutions there to try and help combat this thing. Like Bernie Sanders is one of the few politicians who's consistently put forward ideas in order to help. The UK has done a good job when they started to make going to university started to get increased the way tuition increases. But rather than having a sit-down discussion about ways to try and come about to help students that are going in, to try and push forward and drive our economy, they're instead scrutinizing us for not investing in the housing market, well, we're killing everything. We killed the diamond industry, we killed the napkin industry. Like, why are we not looking at solutions so that we can continue to contribute to a healthy economy, but instead now try to get more money from us rather than try to get us to a place where we can start to potentially save and invest? The average millennial earns $30,000 a year, but has an average of student loan debt of $35,000 a year. And now we want to take that money quicker from student loans.
Yeah, first to Francis' point on the overall issue, and then a point about DeVos and this problem. The overall issue is that we have priced people out of the higher education market. And as Francis says, these are crippling debts that people just can't possibly pay. So you end up in a collection situation way too quickly, and no reasonable person with a reasonable income is able to address these collection situations in any kind of reasonable way because they're unreasonable. And that prices people out of higher education, and that leads to, if you want to look again at the meta picture, to an electorate that is undereducated and underinformed. So even if you go to a trade school, whatever it may be, the price of all of these things is way too high. And now to Betsy DeVos. This is a clear conflict of interest. As Anna says, normally they spread these collection agencies out over a dozen or more companies. But all of a sudden we're down to 2 companies, one of which used to be my old company, Betsy DeVos' old company, right? That's what she's saying. Oh my God, what a coincidence. We're going to use my old company. I just divested from them a couple of weeks ago. What a weird thing that they happen to end up being one of the 2 companies that's in charge of all the collection. No need to spread it out over 17 companies anymore. We're going to give it to my old company and one other company. Nothing in this administration passes the smell test, and you can add this onto the pile of stuff that doesn't.
That's exactly right. And, you know, the Education Department is saying that Betsy DeVos had nothing to do with the decision. Let me give you their statement. Obviously, I don't personally believe them. Education Department spokesman Nathan Bailey said Thursday that DeVos had, quote, no knowledge, let alone involvement in the new debt collection contract. Also, Richard Zubik, who heads investor relations at Performant, said in an email that the company has never had any direct or indirect contact with DeVos or anyone related to DeVos. You know, it just so happened that they had a marginal rating, and out of all of those other bidders, the Education Department decided to go with them instead of any other company. So I do think that those other debt collection agencies, even though I'm not a fan of debt collection agencies, they will file a lawsuit and fight this, and we'll see how it turns out. But in every federal department, we are seeing deep corruption, we are seeing conflicts of interest, and it will continue. As long as we're asleep at the wheel, and as long as we pay all of our attention to nonsense stories and all the salacious garbage, they will continue to use their position of power to benefit themselves and pad their own pockets.
If you like this video, bless your heart. We got a lot more where that came from. We do a full show every day, Monday through Friday. Come enjoy it ad-free by becoming a member, tytnetwork.com/join.